9/11 Truth Movement has long honored and respected the eyewitness testimonies of the first responders, reporters, and citizens at the World Trade Center. But what about the eyewitness testimony of the first responders, reporters, and citizens at the Pentagon? Almost all of us have only heard a few selected words from among the abundant witness testimonies given by those citizens describing what they saw at the Pentagon on 9/11. The Pentagon witnesses deserve the same respect that we give to the World Trade Center witnesses. Witness reliability. When an event is seen by multiple witnesses, the most accurate comprehension of that event is known to be found by examining the totality of collective descriptions and identifying the common threads and the recurring words that the varying testimonies share.
Okay, we have another person on the phone. Janet, are you with us?
Yes, I am.
We understand that you witnessed this plane, a plane crash into the Pentagon?
Yes, sir, I did.
Tell us exactly what you saw.
Well, I live in a high-rise building just outside of Roslyn, and I was actually glued to the television, and I have an office here, and it's all glassed in, and I saw a plane just coming right in front of my window, flying at a path that the commercial planes do not fly. Not coming into the direction to land at National Airport.
How big was the plane?
It certainly looked larger. Every once in a while there's a flight path difference for smaller private planes that come in. This was not a small private-looking plane. It looked more like sort of a commuter-type plane.
And you said
but it was sizable, yeah.
And then you said it was headed directly to the Pentagon.
Yeah, it was heading in the direction of the airport, and I thought, this plane is way too low, and there's no runway that it goes in that direction, and it didn't turn at all. And I just, as soon as I saw it, I knew it was way too low and not on a flight path that I'd ever seen before living here.
Okay, and what did you hear?
I couldn't hear anything from where I am. I just saw the plane just disappear out of my sight beyond the trees, and then I just saw massive billows of smoke.
Pentagon, we were up there on the roof up there, and a guy yelled down that they bombed New York City. And I was just watching the White House just to see anything, if it could happen, what's going to happen. And next thing you know, from out of nowhere, you just saw a plane real low and just went straight, didn't come in from high, came in real low, and just the back end of the Pentagon just blew it up, big mushroom fire cloud. It's insane.
This morning when she saw what happened, can you tell me, you say that you saw a plane actually strike the side of the Pentagon. Tell me exactly what you saw.
I saw a plane going down, big plane, commercial liner type, going down full speed and just inside the side of the Pentagon. Obviously, it was going in the Pentagon purposely. And we were driving down Columbia Pike, and it just flew right over us. As I said, full speed, and I told my husband, it's going in the Pentagon, it's going in the Pentagon, and then we heard the huge crash, saw this fireball, and flame, and smoke, and...
So you actually saw the plane impact the side of the building?
Yes, I did.
Just one plane?
Just one plane.
Tell me a little bit about the size of the plane. Did you see any commercial markings, any markings at all on the plane?
I didn't see any marking because it was, we just saw the underneath portion of it. So, and it just, as I said, was going full speed. So, but it was a big plane, maybe 737. My husband said 747, but I'm not positive. I don't know for sure. But it was big. Definitely the kind of plane you get on when you want to fly to LA or wherever.
I have on the telephone with me Barbara, who is the wife of a friend of mine and who is an eyewitness to exactly what happened at the Pentagon. Barbara, can you hear me all right?
Yes, I can hear you.
Well, what exactly did you see? Let's look at the Pentagon now as you describe what exactly happened at the Pentagon this morning.
As we were driving into town on 395, there was an exit. We were trying to get off the exit for the Memorial Bridge. Off to the left-hand side was a commercial plane that came in and was coming too fast and too low. And the next thing we saw was it go down below the side of the road, and we just saw the fire that came up after that.
How large was the explosion?
It was large.
Was there sound as well?
That I can't verify because the windows were up in the vehicle.
Was it clear to you what had happened?
Yes, definitely.
So you believe it was a commercial airliner that was hitting the Pentagon?
Yes.
How low was the plane?
When it was coming down?
Yeah.
It was coming down on less than a 45-degree angle and coming down toward the side of the 395.
But it seemed awfully low to you?
Yes, and fast. And when it came down, it just missed the 395 and went down below it, and then you saw the boom, the fire come up from it.
Identify yourself and tell us what you saw.
My name is Ed Hudson. I was coming to work at the Navy Annex. I was passing by Fort Myer, and I saw a large airliner-sized plane, roughly a 767-sized airliner, very deep descent, approaching the Pentagon. As I didn't actually see the impact, but I did see, hear the blast, and saw the smoke rising from the crash later. And this was, just shortly after hearing the news about the crashes at the World Trade Towers.
Now, it did not look like that plane tried to avoid the Pentagon at all?
No, it seemed deliberate. It was outside the normal flight patterns for a national airport.
I've seen debris 20 feet from where we're standing. Have you seen debris also?
I did.
Describe what you've seen over there.
It just seemed like parts of the landing carriage or possibly the engines.
His name is Alan Wallace, and he is a civilian employee at the Pentagon. Ironically, he happens to be a firefighter who was stationed with his fire truck close to the point of impact of the plane. And he described to me exactly what the scene looked like. He looked up, he said he saw the plane about 50 feet away, screamed for his partner to run. They took off running, and Alan Wallace now takes up the narrative.
At the time when I said, you mean referring to when I saw the plane, when I first saw the plane?
Right.
There was a flash, a horrific crunch, there was a fireball.
I came down Washington Boulevard where I ended up next to a cab that was struck by one of the street lamps, apparently that was knocked down from the aircraft as it was making its descent into the Pentagon. There was debris over the roadways, specifically where I was, Washington Boulevard.
Okay, then let me go quickly to someone named Don Wright, who saw the plane crash into the Pentagon. Don, are you there in Washington?
Yes, I am.
Can you tell us what happened?
Yes, it was about 9:35, and I was looking out our 12th floor windows at 1600 Wilson Boulevard in Roswell, Virginia, and I watched this. It looked like a commuter plane, two-engine, come down from the south, real low, proceed right on and crashed right into the Pentagon.
Went directly into the Pentagon?
That is correct.
Looked like a deliberate act?
A deliberate act, sir.
And can you tell me what direction it came from, Don?
It came from the south. And about the time I saw the plane, I watched it come in very low over the trees, and it just dipped down, came down right over 395, right into the Pentagon.
Don Wright, an eyewitness to the crash at the Pentagon.
We have an eyewitness, I think, to what happened here at the Pentagon. If you have a moment, Heather Cabbage bringing that person over here. Can you tell me what you saw and where you were?
Well, we were on Columbia Pike where the shelter is, and all of a sudden you can hear the noise coming first, and then you can feel the shaking of the building. And we just looked up out of the window, and I saw the tail end go.
What size plane?
It was for me, it looked like a big size plane. It was definitely a passenger plane. And everything shook, and then all of a sudden you just heard this big explosion, and somebody said, my God, they hit the Pentagon, they hit the Pentagon.
What's your name?
Mark Eason.
Thank you, Mark.
Yes, sir.
Our phone now, Mark Pettit. He was at the Pentagon. He was an eyewitness to what happened there today. Mr. Pettit, are you there?
Yes, I am.
Can you tell us what you saw?
Yeah, I was actually sitting in traffic on Route 110 on my way to work. I work across the street. And it was an American Airlines plane that came in and hit the Pentagon. I believe it was a 737. I could be mistaken. It might have been a 707, but it was definitely a commercial plane.
And about what time did this happen, Mr. Pettit?
Probably about 9:35, 9:40.
Right.
I saw the plane coming down. It actually came up 395, and it just went over the horizon, and then it came back in front of a bridge where I was sitting, and I knew it was going to hit. I mean, I'd already heard about the World Trade Center, and the next thing you know, it was just a huge explosion, black smoke everywhere, and all you could see was just billowing black smoke everywhere.
All right. Mark Pettit, we appreciate it. An eyewitness to that airplane crash at the Pentagon.
I'm here with Michael Kelly, who was a witness to this attack at the Pentagon. I'm going to let him describe what he saw here, I guess about 20 minutes ago with me, Michael Kelly. First of all, let me just first describe the scene. This is the west side of the Pentagon, the heliport side off of Washington Boulevard. Were you driving or what?
Yes, I was in the traffic on the 14th Street Bridge, right at the Pentagon, tied up going into town, and I heard this plane come over my head. It was very, very low. And the next thing I know, there was this tremendous explosion as it hit the Pentagon. I looked over, and the smoke started coming up. Pieces of the plane and pieces of the Pentagon were falling onto the 14th Street, onto the Shirley Highway. Very scary.
Had you known about the World Trade Center?
Oh, yeah, I was listening to WTOP radio the whole time, and then this thing came right over my head, and it plowed. It was clearly a similar situation to what happened in New York.
Hey, Mike, I'm here with a familiar face, Mike Walder of USA Today. Mike, you actually saw this happen. Tell us what you saw.
I did indeed, Gordon. You know, like everyone else, I was listening to the radio to the accounts of what was going on in New York. I was listening to President Bush, and we were stuck in traffic. We're coming off the exit here, and I looked up and I saw this American Airlines jet coming in very low, and I watched it, and it clipped. I don't know if you can see it over here. It clipped this pole over here, slammed right into the building. Huge explosion.
Now, you're sure it was an American Airlines plane?
You know, we were stuck in traffic. Could not move. I could see the big AA, the silver jet itself. I thought it was a 737. I may be mistaken there, but there was no doubt about it. It was American Airlines slammed right into the building, and there was no doubt about it. Whoever was piloting that plane was aiming for the Pentagon. I saw the ball of fire, and I saw it clip these poles, and then the billowing smoke, a gray column of smoke.
Witnesses describe seeing an enormous fireball. Then heavy black smoke rose into the sky.
And I looked over to the side, and I saw this jet coming in, and it was really low. And it was an American Airlines jet. You could read the AA on the side, silver fuselage, and it kind of disappeared over this embankment here for a moment, and then huge explosion. Flames flying into the air, and just chaos on the road.
The plane struck a portion of the Pentagon that had recently been renovated.
I'm sorry, sir, your name, please?
Sean Lansdale.
What'd you see, Sean?
I was sitting in my bedroom back at home, and
where's that, sir?
It's right in Arlington. I'm like 4 minutes away from the Pentagon.
Right.
And I was sitting in my living room, and my building started shaking, and I knew that no plane supposed to make my building shake. Well, when I turned around and looked up, I see this plane, and I agree with the young lady that was just speaking. It was like a 757.
Jamie McIntyre. And Jamie, you got very close to where that plane went down.
That's right, Judy. A while ago, I walked right up to next to the building. Firefighters were still trying to put out the blaze. The fire, by the way, is still burning in some parts of the Pentagon. And I took a look at the huge gaping hole that's in this side of the Pentagon, in an area of the Pentagon that has been recently renovated, part of a multi-billion-dollar renovation program here at the Pentagon. I could see parts of the airplane that crashed into the building, very small pieces of the plane on the heliport outside the building. The biggest piece I saw was about 3 feet long. It was silver and had been painted green and red, but I could not see any identifying markings on the plane. I also saw a large piece of shattered glass. It appeared to be a cockpit windshield or other window from the plane.
You witnessed what happened at the Pentagon. What did you see?
From my office, I was able to see a jet just came at a high rate of speed, and it just increased its speed as it got closer to the Pentagon, and then I just saw the big yellow ball of fire.
Don, exactly where is your office? From where are you watching this?
Our office is right at St. Barnabas Road in the Beltway, so I overlook the Beltway from my office.
Mm-hmm. Now, we do also have somebody to talk with us who was an eyewitness to the actual crash. He was watching from Arlington, Virginia, which is a suburb over. His name is Tim Timmerman. Mr. Timmerman, are you with us right now?
I sure am.
You're a pilot. Tell us what you saw.
Well, I was looking out the window. I live on the 16th floor overlooking the Pentagon and the corner apartment, so I have quite a panorama. And being next to National Airport, I hear jets all the time, but this jet engine I heard was way too loud. I looked out to the south, to the southwest, and it came right down 395 right over Columbia Pike. And as it went by the Sheraton Hotel, the pilot added power to the engines. I heard it spool up a little more. And then I lost it behind a building, and then it came out, and I saw it hit. I saw the nose break up, I saw the wings fly forward, and then the conflagration took, just engulfed everything in flames. It was horrible.
What can you tell us about the plane itself?
It was a Boeing 757, American Airlines, no question.
You say that it was a Boeing, and you say it was a 757 or 767. It's hard.
757.
757,
yeah,
which
American
of course is
Airlines.
American Airlines, one of the new generation of jets, and of
right.
course
It was not. It was so close to me. It was like looking out my window and looking at the helicopter. It was just right there.
We were told that it was. We were told that it was flying so low that it clipped off a couple of light poles on its way in.
That might have happened behind the apartments that occluded my view, and when it reappeared, it was right before impact. And like I said, I saw the airplane disintegrate and then just blow up into a huge ball of flame.
So there was a fireball that you saw.
Absolutely, and the building shook, and it was, quite a tremendous explosion. It had just caught the E-ring on the outside. It looked like on the helipad, which is on that side.
We have Dawn on the phone now, who was another witness to what happened at the Pentagon. Dawn, can you hear us? Dawn?
Hello?
Yes, Dawn. This is Andrea in the newsroom with Mike Buchanan. What did you see?
I saw it was an American Airlines 757, and it came in and hit the heliport, came down Columbia Pike and hit the heliport next to the Pentagon. I live in an apartment building on that side of the Pentagon, and it just crashed right into it.
You said it was a 757. How could you tell? How could you see that?
Yes, I could see it. And my roommate is an airplane person, and he saw it too. I mean, we saw the whole thing.
Okay.
Did it didn't come out of National? It came in from the west.
It came right down.
Came down Columbia Pike.
Low and with throttles on.
With the full throttle?
Yeah. He actually added power right by the Sheridan.
And that's what we heard from Don as well. Added power and went straight for the Pentagon. So this was no accident.
No.
It was deliberate.
This was aimed right at it.
Dave and I are standing here thanks to Heather Cabot with Harry Goad, who was the Space Policy and Acquisition Division of DOD. You're on the 5th floor, and you saw this thing coming?
I did.
Tell us what happened.
We were just watching the World Trade Center on the internet, and I turned around, and I'm at a very large window, and I turned around and looked, and I saw the silver 757, it looked like to me, veering from the registered course over the Potomac River, and it had no landing gear down, and it was coming very, very rapidly, and then it took a dive, maybe a couple of miles, maybe over Roslyn. It took a dive into this building, and I saw it coming, and I hollered, "Hit the deck," and everybody in the office hit the deck because they knew that the World Trade Center was on fire.
So you figured this was it?
This was it. They were coming in, and they're going to hit a lot of buildings, and this is going to be one of them.
So there's no question in your mind that the pilot, whoever was piloting that aircraft, was aiming for the building?
He was aiming for the building, but he could have went into center court mighty easily, which would have really done some damage, and I don't know, but whoever hit the outside, God bless him, because that also is an area of the Pentagon that's going to be under renovation. We've already done one wedge, and we've moved a lot of people out of this wedge here over there.
Yes, hi, Buck and Andrea. We're on the 22nd floor of the USA Today Tower. Over my left-hand shoulder is the Pentagon building with the billowing smoke. To my right here is Joel Suckerman. He is the assistant managing editor of USAtoday.com. On his way to work, he witnessed the plane crash into the Pentagon. Joel, tell us what you saw.
Well, while listening to the radio reports of the World Trade Center problem, there was a sonic boom, and looking straight ahead, there was a jet, what looked to be an American Airlines jet, probably a 757, and it came screaming across the highway. It was Route 110 on the west side of the Pentagon. The plane went west to east, hit the west side of the Pentagon. Immediately, flames were streaming up into the air. There was white smoke, and then within seconds, thick black smoke. Everybody got out of their cars. People were shocked.
Describe the first plane again. You say it was a commercial jet. Do you know how many engines?
I did not see the engines. I saw the body and the tail, and it was a silver jet with the markings along the windows that spoke to me as an American Airlines jet. This was not a commercial, a business jet, right? It was not a Learjet, Gulfstream, something like that. It was a bigger plane than that.
As we started getting away, there were people on the road because we were very close to the exit, and they were saying, "Oh my God, did you see that? It was an airplane. It was an airplane." They kept saying it was a big airplane.
I'm Captain McCoy, Engine Company 101B. We're coming down 395 at the time of the accident. We saw the plane come into the Pentagon. In this area, we're used to seeing planes, okay, coming in low all the time. And this particular plane was awful low, and as we were coming down on the 395, it came across in front of us, and it was low, too low. And all we saw was it banked, and when it banked, it went down into the Pentagon. After it hit, we saw the big mushroom cloud of smoke. I was able to tell that it was a jet airliner commercial.
As it was coming in, and I watched it come right in. And what kind of plane was it? American Airlines. It came streaking down and it hit short. It didn't go into the top of the Pentagon. It came like in short, and then everything sprayed up like a fireball sprayed up on the wall. And I saw it right come out of the side of my eye first, and then it went right in front of me, went right past me, you know. And like I said, the thing that shocked me the most, and it stays with me now, is the severity of the intention, the idea of the angle that when it came in was coming like right in hard, you know, to hit the Pentagon.
Aziz El Halou, he works right up the street here from our studios here, and you were headed to work this morning with your girlfriend, and tell us what you saw.
Yes, sir. Just around 9:08, 9:15, just hitting 110 south, actually north. And it was just amazing, something you only see in the movies. That huge airplane looks to me like a 757 American Airlines, probably flying around 60 to 70 yards on top of my car.
Oh my goodness.
Everything was shaking. And the next thing we saw, that airplane crashed in the Pentagon. The Pentagon sucked in the airplane, so we didn't see any more parts or any pieces of the airplane.
A piece of the aircraft actually landed and broke your windshield, as I understand it.
Just landed by the car. And
Unbelievable.
this is one of...
Now, Aziz, in this situation that took place today, what did the other motorists do? I mean, did everybody stop their cars and get out?
Everybody stopped and got out from them car, and they started running left or right, and we had big panic at that time.
See this again? And this is it's almost macabre to have a piece of something like that in your hands, something that is a part of such a national, international, world tragedy that took place on this day. And you and so many other motorists saw this thing happen today.
And most of the cars, they had the front windshield broken because of the noise of the airplane. And just the time I turned my head to the left, it seems like the pilot or the person who was in charge of the airplane put full torque or throttle to the airplane.
It seemed like it was going faster as it went into it.
Exactly, yeah. It was, and especially, as I mentioned to you, I do fly small airplanes occasionally. And it looked to me as someone professional, especially when you maneuver and turn the airplane, it takes you a few seconds to put the wings equally settled.
But it didn't seem to you like that this wasn't a pilot who was struggling for control of the aircraft. This is someone who was heading it right in there.
Exactly.
That I wonder if you sense that it's going to take a long time to get over.
Unfortunately, I don't. I hope they will stop it immediately and the world come up to a peace.
Aziz El Halou, thank you very much. I appreciate you coming by.
I saw that plane coming right at me, but he picked up a little bit, and the plane came right over top of me. I could see all the windows on the right side going by.
We were sitting in the office, and all of a sudden we heard some rumbling. Something is kind of hitting us. Very imminent things could happen. So we look at each other, and it really, the noise is unbearable. And at the last moment, my brother jumped out the office.
I heard about the very big jet sound. Looks like just up to here. I just look at the outside, big black wings coming that way. And then I just running out, and then 2-3 seconds, boom!
Coming in at a shallow angle like it was landing right into the side of the Pentagon.
And ended up right in front of the Pentagon on Route 27, which stuck in totally standstill traffic, just sitting dead still on the highway. And basically, without warning, there was just the sensation of something coming over the top of us. It seems the plane was so low that it hit a light pole that was just on the edge of the highway, on the far side there. Before it came over the highway, it clipped this pole, which I heard ended up being knocked over and hitting a taxi, which was near my car.
My name is Lloyd England. 9/11, I was driving my car on my way home. This airplane flew over top of my car. It was real close. Glass, a loud noise happened, and the pole came through the dashboard right through the car. I stopped the car in the middle of the street. It didn't stop straight, it stopped at an angle.
Over 180 witnesses are on record describing what they saw at the Pentagon on the morning of 9/11. 127 witnesses said they saw a large plane. 7 witnesses identified the plane they saw as a Boeing 757. 26 witnesses identified the plane they saw as an American Airlines plane. 63 witnesses saw the plane impact the Pentagon. 13 witnesses saw the plane hit one or more of the 5 downed light poles. 4 witnesses saw the plane hit the fence and generator trailer. Pentagon witnesses deserve the same respect that we give to the World Trade Center witnesses. As a compliment to the film we have just seen, our next speaker, Mr. David Chandler, who was a special guest at the film festival 5 years ago, he returns to this stage for the second time to present his talk, Going Beyond Speculation, a scientific look at the Pentagon Evidence. Mr. David Chandler retired after 35 years teaching physics and mathematics at the high school and college levels. He is most known, and he is recognized as a heroic figure in our movement for the following: for accurately measuring the downward acceleration of the buildings at the World Trade Center and challenging NIST on its false analysis of the collapse of WTC-7, leading NIST to change their final report to a different false analysis. Now, it bears repeating. David Chandler's research and scholarship and publication led NIST to change their final report to a different and also false analysis. He is currently on the board of scientists for September 11th Truth. He maintains the website 911speakout.org. Friends, would you please welcome to the stage Mr. David Chandler.
This is not my usual talk. Today I am not speaking to the world about 9/11. I'm speaking to the 9/11 Truth Movement. I would like for us to think about how the movement is speaking to the world. We as a movement are making claims that are highly offensive to many people. We're asking them to believe that the government or elements within the government attacked and killed thousands of Americans for a mixture of base motives, including the creation of a false pretext for war. Some people stop listening right there, unwilling to entertain this thought and unwilling to listen to arguments they can see leading in this direction. I've had people I would otherwise characterize as progressive, intelligent, and open-minded stop me cold and refuse to listen to anything I had to say on the subject of 9/11. With few exceptions, pretty much the entire media establishment, left, right, and center, reacts this way. We have been painted as conspiracy theorists. Conspiracy thinking is seen as a form of mental illness. That term is used to imply that we have an analysis that is biased by our propensity to see the world as run by all-powerful, invisible puppet masters. There are people in the movement who do think this way, but I believe the only people they convince are those predisposed to that view already. I vigorously deny that I am a conspiracy theorist. I deal in hard evidence. The most effective bridge I have found in talking with the unconvinced, if I can get past the initial resistance, is to present the scientific evidence in the purest possible terms, one point at a time, allowing the listeners to digest the information. Speculation carries little weight in this kind of conversation and may be positively detrimental. Allowing myself to get sidetracked into speculation, which I admit is easy to do, is typically the shortest path to ending the conversation. At the World Trade Center, there is a clear path of verifiable evidence that leads to the conclusion that there was heavy involvement by government agencies and the military-industrial complex. I usually cite 3 strands of evidence. The first is dynamic. We have a large amount of video evidence showing in great detail the airplane, the collisions, and most importantly, the way the buildings fell. We can deduce from the dynamics of the building collapses, backed by quantitative measurements, that these are demolitions, not simply gravitational collapses. The constant downward acceleration of the North Tower. And the absolute freefall of Building 7 imply they were not meeting normal resistance. The buildings were falling into a void created by explosives. Explosives can be seen at work very directly in the squibs that occurred far below the collapse front and in secondary explosions directly visible among the falling fragments. The second point is thermodynamic. There is overwhelming evidence that temperatures were reached during the collapses and in the rubble pile that exceed the maximum temperature of office fires and jet fuel fires by over 1,000 degrees Fahrenheit. This evidence includes molten metal with the color temperature of molten iron that can be seen pouring from the South Tower moments before onset of collapse. The ample eyewitness testimony to high temperatures and molten steel in the rubble pile, as observed and described by the first responders, and the billions of tiny iron spheres that constituted a significant percentage of the dust that covered Manhattan. Iron spheres imply that iron was melted in a blast environment that dispersed the droplets and allowed them to cool to tiny iron spheres before hitting the ground. The third line of evidence is chemical, and that's the nanothermite that was found in the dust. If you haven't read the paper for yourself, you really should. It's called Active Thermitic Material Discovered in Dust from the 9/11 World Trade Center Catastrophe. It's a landmark achievement of the 9/11 Truth Movement. It's a scientific paper, but it is clearly written and readable by anyone capable of reading an article from Scientific American. If you can't find it elsewhere online, I have a copy posted on my website, which is 911speakout.org. Nanothermite is manufactured in U.S. military labs. It is the DNA evidence that links 9/11 to the military-industrial complex. I usually cite these 3 lines of evidence as the core of the scientific proof of demolition, but there's another. Graham McQueen has systematically studied the massive database of first responder oral histories and found a large number of references to explosions in the towers.
The explosion inside the lobby. There was a secondary explosion.
Then there was some secondary explosions and
3 big explosions.
We heard a very loud blast, an explosion. It sounded like an explosion.
His talk at the Toronto hearings is one of the clearest presentations of this evidence. I have a link to his talk on my website, 9/11, which is 911speakout.org once again. I am mentioning it here because, as Ken Jenkins' video shows, eyewitness testimony is one of the big factors at the Pentagon as well. Individual eyewitness testimony is subject to distortion, but the cumulative weight of independent eyewitness testimony of large numbers of people tends to have high validity, and importantly, it has a long history of being recognized as valid by the courts. When I present solid scientific evidence devoid of extraneous speculation, listeners are induced to engage with the evidence themselves and integrate it into their overall understanding of the event. It takes me out of the loop. I'm no longer promoting conspiracy theories. Rather, they are constructing their own theories as they work to integrate the new information into their worldviews. When people draw me into speculative questions, I draw a clear line in the sand. I tell them anything I say beyond this point is speculation. For instance, listeners frequently ask me how the explosives could have been snuck in and placed without detection. I don't really know. We have no direct observations of this being done. However, it is plausible that workers who have badges that take them through security, close down access to elevator shafts, set out orange cones, wheel in pallets of what looks like construction material, and make a lot of noise, are pretty much par for the course in an urban setting and are essentially invisible. There is a big difference, however, between this kind of speculative comment and the basic information about iron spheres, nanothermite, and freefall. What is not helpful in the discussion of the World Trade Center and what makes us look foolish to the outside world are implausible claims based on speculation and sloppy analysis. Claims of no planes at the World Trade Center, video fakery, holograms not planes, missiles not planes, mysterious pods under the planes, the discounting of nanothermite in favor of unspecified energy beams, mini-dukes in the basements. I get emails from these people all the time. As recently as a week ago, I went 2 rounds of email with a no-planer who claimed a plane image was photoshopped into a rerun image which wasn't there in the live footage. When he sent me what he claimed were the original and altered images, it took a matter of seconds to realize the 2 images were taken at different times because the smoke cloud had changed. I sometimes respond for a round or 2, but they typically are impervious to a fact-based discussion, so I set them aside and move on. No plane theories at the Pentagon started up mere weeks after the event with Thierry Masson, a French journalist who postulated truck bombs before revising this to a missile attack. The only evidence he went on was the supposed lack of plane parts on the lawn and early estimates of the size of the hole in the Pentagon wall based on photographs that were heavily obscured by sprays from water hoses. Notice the entire ground floor is blocked off here by the water spray. This is a famous photograph, by the way. And Ken Jenkins was commenting, this photograph right here is probably the genesis of no plane theories at the Pentagon. Jim Hoffman and his 9/11 research site has mirrored the work of an anonymous blogger who constructed a mosaic of the damage at the Pentagon wall based on multiple photographs, each of which showed part of the damage. It turns out that the size of the hole and other damage to the facade is consistent with a high-speed 757 impact. Another element to this discussion is the recognition of what a high-speed airplane impact actually looks like. In 1988, Sandia National Laboratories put an F-4 Phantom jet on a rocket sled and crashed it into a 10-foot thick reinforced concrete barrier to test the safety of nuclear energy facilities. The plane hit the wall at 480 miles per hour, and it was turned into confetti. No large plane parts survived. This is not the concrete you see billowing out, it's the plane. Only a few millimeters of this concrete, this reinforced stuff, got destroyed. The planes that hit the Twin Towers and the Pentagon were traveling even faster. A large plane at the same speed as this Phantom jet would have the same amount of kinetic energy per kilogram. All of that energy would have to be dissipated to bring the plane to rest. If the Pentagon plane had hit an impermeable wall, we would have witnessed a rerun of the Phantom jet experiment. However, the wall gave way, so the heavy parts of the plane went in, and a majority of the kinetic energy was dissipated, tearing up the inside of the building. The wingtips and tail that were blocked by the wall were, as in the Phantom experiment, turned to confetti, leaving only small debris on the lawn. That is the fundamental flaw in the Hunt the Boeing websites. The no-plane frenzy was fed by the short sequence of frames from surveillance cameras at the Pentagon. There was the entrance into the frame of something fuzzy with a trail of smoke, and then a blast. The smoke trail fueled speculation that it was a missile. Jets don't leave smoke trails, missiles do. These frames don't prove a 757 impact because we can't see the object clearly. But the question here is, can these frames rule out a 757? Careful modeling of the motion of the plane turns out to present a picture consistent with the location and size of the fuzzy object. And the smoke trail can plausibly be attributed to something being ingested by one of the engines. The maker of this animation suggests that it could be a globe from one of the struck light poles. There are other possibilities that I'll mention later. Just a reminder, the question here is whether the smoke trail video could rule out a 757. The answer is no, since there are plausible mechanisms to generate the smoke trail, and since the overall size and shape of the fuzzy blob are consistent with a 757 at this distance. The burden of proof has not been met. Another objection to the possibility of a 757 hitting the Pentagon wall is the supposed height of the plane from top of the fuselage to the bottom of the engines. It has been claimed that the engines extend 9 feet below the bottom of the plane. This is simply not true. The engines hang below the wings, but the centers of the engines align closely with the bottom of the fuselage. The geometry works out just fine for a 757 to clear the lawn and still enter the Pentagon, consistent with the damage pattern. By the way, those blue areas are areas where there's facade damage, and that's where the light areas like the tail and the wingtips hit, but the red area shows where all of the heavy parts of the plane, there's room for them to go in. Early photographs show relatively little debris on the lawn. This was misleading because most of the photographs were taken from the roadway and the large distances appeared foreshortened. The lack of debris on the lawn was taken as evidence that there was no plane. As more photographs emerged, there was abundant evidence of plane debris, some of it with what appears to be American Airlines markings. So an objection has been raised that most of the plane debris on the lawn was found closer to the helipad, which is to the left or the north of the impact point. This assertion is based on an incomplete photographic record, but assuming it's true, it's not surprising. When the plane struck the Pentagon, it hit at an angle of 52 degrees with respect to the Pentagon wall. Each part of the plane, therefore, had a component of its velocity parallel with the wall, of about 60% of its overall ground speed. After the collision, the average velocity of the many pieces of the plane that were pulverized but remained outside the building would still have significant northward velocity component due to conservation of momentum, which would carry it preferentially northward toward the heliport and fire station. Yes, there is much plane debris. Yes, the photographs that exist show most of it to the left of the entrance hole. but that can be understood as a direct consequence of the geometry of the impact. Another element in the most current no-plane theory, or I should call it no-impact theory, since a plane does show up later in the theory, is that the Pentagon event occurred about 6 minutes earlier than the official stated time of impact, 9:38. This claim is based on photographs of stopped clocks in the rubble showing times close to 9:32. It is claimed that all of the stopped clocks agreed on this earlier time. The clock anomaly is not reliable evidence, however. First, these were battery-operated clocks. I taught for years with an almost identical clock on my classroom wall. You could set it by simply moving the minute hand. Every clock in the school was a bit different, and batteries do run down. There is no reason to believe that battery-operated clocks on the office walls were rigorously synchronized. Secondly, the assertion that all the stopped clocks indicate a violent event at 9:32 is based on cherry-picked data. Other stopped clocks read other times as shown here. These were also clocks found in the Pentagon rubble, and they do not agree with the 9:32. John Wyndham has done a series of experiments, this is his wife, I believe, dropping clocks of the type shown in the photographs. He did this repeatedly and recorded the results in great detail. When set with the minute hand on the 37-minute mark and dropped, inertia pulls the minute hand downward. It typically ends up closer to the 30-minute mark. It should be noted that to be stopped by an impact, the clock would have to hit hard enough to dislodge the AA battery in the back. This amount of impact is going to make the reading totally unreliable. And as John's experiment shows, the expected offset is in line with the observations. The paper detailing John Wyndham's experiment is posted at scientificmethod911.org, which is his website. So in conclusion, there is no credible time anomaly. By contrast, we know the actual time of impact within seconds rather than minutes because the plane coming into the Pentagon was being tracked by multiple radar installations under the control of different agencies, some civilian, some military. During the final approach leading straight to the Pentagon, it was tracked by 4 different radar systems until it descended below the radar as it passed the Sheraton Hotel, which is about 1 kilometer from impact. Each radar blip carries its own precisely calibrated time signature, and these agree to high precision. There is also the flight data recorder. This is the flight data recorder found in the Pentagon, and the data from it's released under the Freedom of Information Act. Some question the authenticity of the FDR data, but I and others believe the data is authentic, based primarily on internal evidence. That's a separate discussion. For now, let me say the FDR and radar data agree. Dropped, uncalibrated, battery-operated wall clocks cannot convincingly discredit multiple independent measurements with high-precision devices that use precisely calibrated time sources. If you personally believe the stopped clock data in preference to the radar data, that's one thing. But this is not the kind of evidence you can present to the world and expect them to take you seriously. The hypothesis that has been proposed based on the 6-minute discrepancy in the stopped clocks and the northward distribution of plane debris on the lawn is that no plane hit the Pentagon. If no plane hit the Pentagon, all damage, including both internal and external damage, had to have been staged using explosives. The presence of airplane debris on the lawn, then, if this is no plane, needs a separate explanation. So this theory postulates a different plane, not the one tracked by radar, not the one observed by hundreds of eyewitnesses. This plane approached the Pentagon 6 minutes earlier and was shot down by a helicopter, an event which apparently nobody witnessed. This hypothesis is breathtaking. Yes, there is plane litter on the lawn, but not enough to account for an entire plane. vast majority of the plane debris from the actual plane went inside the Pentagon. There is a classic problem in elementary physics textbooks asking what happens to the momentum of a thrown hand grenade as it explodes in midair. The answer is the total momentum of the fragments equals the momentum of the hand grenade before the explosion. The center of mass of the cloud of fragments continues along the same path as before the explosion. Shooting down a plane does not destroy its momentum. If this other plane had been shot down, the debris would have continued forward and hit the Pentagon like a shotgun blast. Yet there is no evidence of any damage to the facade due to this proposed plane. Other problems with this shoot-down hypothesis are too numerous to discuss here in detail, but I will try briefly. There were over 180 eyewitnesses on record for the plane this theory claims did not exist, but no eyewitnesses for this other plane or the shoot-down event. The plane that supposedly did not exist was tracked by multiple radar installations, but there is no radar record of this hypothesized plane. There is a huge smoke cloud generated by the main event, whether you see it as an explosion or an impact, but there's no evidence of any smoke cloud from the shoot-down event. The Pentagon surveillance camera that recorded the main event showed no evidence of wreckage or smoke from a prior event. Sean Boger, who was in the control tower of the helipad, described the main event in great detail and described it, by the way, as an impact. But he makes no mention of an earlier shoot-down event. This hypothesis appears to have been invented on the fly simply to explain the presence of airplane debris in an otherwise no-plane theory. There's absolutely no corroborating evidence. The alternate plane shoot-down is an unnecessary and absurdly implausible hypothesis. Its net effect is to discredit the 9/11 truth movement. So what does the evidence actually show? We have the air traffic control recordings of communications with each of the 4 airliners throughout their flights. These were released under the Freedom of Information Act in 2011. They're available. These established that the flights actually existed, actually took off, and proceeded normally until they were taken over. We have Norman Minetta's testimony about the conversation between an aide and Dick Cheney as the flight was approaching Washington.
During the time that the airplane coming in to the Pentagon, there was a young man who would come in and say to the vice president, the plane is 50 miles out, the plane is 30 miles out. And when it got down to the plane is 10 miles out, the young man also said to the vice president, do the orders still stand? And the vice president turned and whipped his neck around and said, of course the orders still stand. Have you heard anything to the contrary? Well, at the time I didn't know what all
famous little interaction. If the Pentagon attack is so central to the presumed PSYOP value of 9/11, would you rather look for government malfeasance behind this conversation or in speculation about elaborately falsified evidence of a non-existent plane at the Pentagon? You can't have both. We have overlapping radar. This, by the way, the primary radar that was real-time by the control towers had some glitches, but there were other radars monitoring the flight continuously, and the entire flight path of AA-77 was recorded. John Farmer has put this all together. Excellent research. We have overlapping radar data from multiple agencies for the entire flight of AA-77 from takeoff to a point within a mile of impact. The transponder was turned off at one point, but radar does not depend on the transponder signal. The radar data terminates as the plane descends to literally fly under the radar for the last kilometer or so. The radar data ends with the plane flying directly toward the hole in the Pentagon. We also have the flight data recorder data for the entire flight, right up to impact. The FDR data agrees well with the radar data. Some claim the data was faked, but the data has a tremendous amount of internal complexity and has the feel of authentic data. The data does not appear designed to make a case for any official story. On the contrary, the positional data shows signs of data drift, so the apparent endpoint actually misses the hole in the Pentagon. However, the direction of motion is in good agreement with the radar data. If this sideways offset is assumed to be the cumulative drift of the sensors, which is something common in instruments, it can be brought into perfect alignment by subtracting out the drift error. This is a reasonable thing to expect in real data, but an unlikely thing to find in a propaganda data set trying to make a fabricated case for an impact of a non-existent plane. Furthermore, the data appears to leave the plane too high to hit the Pentagon in the last readable frame. This was very problematic until Warren Stutt, who's a computer scientist in Australia, discovered that the last frame of the raw data failed to translate to the other file, the human readable version, because of bit glitches in the last data frame. When those glitches were patched, the last frame became readable, and the corrected path led directly to the impact point. This situation also speaks to what one might expect of real data, but which would be counterproductive to build into a propaganda data set. Why would a propaganda data set be elaborately constructed to contain systematic errors and glitches that point away from the intended message? My conclusion is the data is authentic, partially for these reasons and partially because it agrees with all the other sources of data. I see no compelling reason to throw it out. You can read the paper on the decoding of the FDR by Frank Legg and Warren Stutt at the Journal of 9/11 Studies. The time of impact given by the fully decoded raw data is 9:37:52, 9:37 and 52 seconds, 6 or 8 seconds later than the official time of impact, which appears to have been estimated based on extrapolating from radar data. Okay, here is the VDOT, the Virginia Department of Transportation, camera pole for traffic camera. It appears to have a rung missing and a scar. If this missing rung was actually knocked off by the plane, this is positioned approximately where the right wingtip would have run. If the missing rung was actually knocked off by the plane, it would locate the position of the plane precisely to within a few inches. A fraction of a second later, you can see up at the top right where the rung is missing, and then notice the top of that tree. Okay? So a fraction of a second later, the starboard engine appears to have cut a circular notch out of the top of the foliage of a tree standing beside the roadway. These events have lower certainty than the following events, but they are consistent with these other events. If the starboard engine actually clipped and ingested the foliage from the top of the tree, it could account for the smoke cloud seen in the Pentagon security camera video. I was curious whether the engine could actually clip the tree or if the tree would just bend out of the way. So my colleague John Cole, who has a heavy tractor mower, calculated the speed of the blade. The power takeoff rotates at 540 RPM. Based on the gear ratio and the length of the blade, he calculated the tip of the blade moves at about 175 miles per hour. Even with a dull blade, it will easily trim brush. The Pentagon plane was moving at about 550 miles per hour in the last seconds. It was accelerating as it went into the Pentagon. So despite the relatively dull edge of the engine wall, it would trim foliage at least as easily as the mower. Immediately after trimming the tree, the plane impacted the light pole that pierced the windshield of a taxi driven by Lloyd England, nearly killing him and causing his taxi to swerve and stop traffic. Both Lloyd and the taxi should be listed as witnesses to the plane. Lloyd in the human eyewitness sense, and the taxi in the sense of a physical detector in physics. The taxi is evidence that the light pole damage happened in real time as the plane approached. It could not have been pre-planted evidence. And by the way, as far as the force needed to dislodge these, the bolts that attach these things to the ground are like fuses. They break off easily, so if a car hits one, it breaks off the pole instead of killing the passengers. If the light pole had been dislodged by some other kind of elaborate explosive scheme, Lloyd and the other travelers who witnessed the event would have testified to an unusual explosion, but they didn't. They witnessed the terror of a very large, very low aircraft nearly colliding with their cars at very high speed. The plane continued to mow down 4 more light poles, 5 in all. Of equal significance is that it failed to mow down several others. The distribution of hit poles establishes the minimum wingspan at about 100 feet, and the path between the remaining poles establishes a maximum wingspan of 140 feet. The actual wingspan of a 757 is 124 feet, 10 inches. So at minimum, we can say the light pole evidence is consistent with a 757. It is not known how much damage the impacts with the light poles caused to the wings. The plane was essentially a projectile by that time. I want to say one other thing. If the wings were full of fuel, that just adds to their inertia and makes them more able to make a substantial impact. Liquids have mass. Just wanted to throw that in. The plane was essentially a projectile by that time and would collide with the Pentagon with or without wings. We do know, however, the wings, at least out to the engines, stayed intact because of what came next. As the plane hit the building, it was tilted slightly to the left. The right engine collided with the top corner of a very heavy generator trailer, causing the generator to rotate clockwise, moving the north end of the generator toward the Pentagon. The left engine hit a low concrete wall, leaving a circular scar. The lateral spacing between these two collision points matches the distance between the engines of a 757. It is worth mentioning that the rotation of the generator trailer is significant in proving an actual impact. There does not appear to be a plausible mechanism for explosives to cause both the scarring and rotation of the north end of the trailer toward the Pentagon. One thing that did not happen was a collision with the cable spools that were sitting on the lawn. It turns out the geometry of the impact allowed the plane to clear the spools. Another thing that did not happen was the spools were not blown away from the Pentagon by an explosion. Any explosion that had the force to move the generator trailer would also have blown the cable spools away. But this did not happen. The clear progression of events is toward the Pentagon. The simplest explanation for all the evidence, and in fact the only explanation that has been attempted to account for all of the external damage in detail, is an impact by a plane the size of a 757. The plane entered the Pentagon primarily at the first floor level. The geometry of the impact works despite what you may have been told. Was this done by a human pilot? It doesn't seem possible. Flying at high speed at low altitude makes the plane almost impossible to control by hand. There is a time delay in the steering mechanism. Stability is possible, however, if computer control is applied directly to the actuators, bypassing the steering mechanism and the human response time. This is not the official story. The official story is the plane was flown into the Pentagon by an amateur hijacker pilot, and it doesn't make sense. One does not have to postulate a no-plane scenario to find evidence of insider involvement. The extremely difficult, high-speed, low-altitude final approach is evidence in itself of external control, hence insider involvement. Beyond the wall of the Pentagon, the public is not invited, but there is significant photographic evidence and oral testimony of first responders to the damage inside, including testimonies about bodies and airplane parts. The damage does not resemble an explosion. Columns are bowed and abraded, showing evidence of a flow of material in line with the flight path. The plane would have been shredded by this time, but the momentum of the debris carried it forward past the interior columns in a manner similar to the flow of a fluid. And when I say that, what I'm saying is particles interacting with each other as they're moving forward. It's not saying they're liquid or anything like that. That's a misinterpretation that some people put on it. The flow of material broke through the C-ring and dumped debris, including a tire and other airplane parts, into the alley between the B and C rings. The distribution of debris outside the C-ring was aligned with the motion of the plane. Much has been made of the roundness of the C-ring hole. My colleague, John Cole, did an interesting study of the hole itself in detail. The hole is not round. The hole is irregular, if you look at it here. Only the surface bricks have the rounded appearance, more like a rounded cornered rectangle, really. The appearance suggests that something broke through from the inside out and tension forces pulled the surface bricks away, giving the rounded look. Notice that there is a vertical pipe that survives crossing the hole. If the hole were created by an explosive charge, the pipe would not have survived. If we step back and look at the event as a whole, the radar path, the FDR path, the path testified to by the vast majority of witnesses, the exterior damage path, the interior damage path, the C-ring hole, and the stream of debris dumped into the alleyway all align perfectly. This confluence of evidence is so striking that any alternative theory must explain these alignments convincingly. No alternative theory to the large plane hypothesis comes even close to doing so. We have heard it argued that the Pentagon attack is a central element of 9/11, if not the central element of 9/11, without which 9/11 might not have been seen as an act of war. That's an interesting point. Let's assume it's true. It does not follow that we must disprove that a plane hit the Pentagon in order to show a covert agenda by the government. There are many questions to be asked. Kevin Ryan has compiled a good list of questions we should be asking. One of the questions on the list, which I consider the primary question, is how was the nation's air defense system disabled on 9/11? How could anything have hit the Pentagon approximately 80 minutes after the first plane was known to be hijacked? With all the new information we now have, the question, what hit the Pentagon, has essentially been answered. It's a large plane, consistent with the 757, probably AA-77 itself. Continuing to insist that it's something else makes us look foolish and paranoid in the eyes of the world. The evidence is in, and it is time for the truth movement to unite around evidence and refuse to be swayed by speculation. The clearest evidence that the Pentagon attack was an inside job is not to be found at the Pentagon at all. The clearest evidence that the Pentagon attack was an inside job is that the World Trade Center attack can be shown with a firm scientific basis to have been an inside job. And the Pentagon attack was clearly part of the same operation. Thank you. I'm early.
Thank you, Mr. David Chandler. Thank you very much.